Hi everyone, welcome. Good to see you all. It's a nice crowd considering we're well into the summer. A lot to tell you, a lot of different topics. I'm going to stop a little bit short so we can have questions because there's a lot going on in the world in case you missed it. But I want to talk about something which is a little nicer this evening because I do a lot of stuff on the war and what's happening in the world today. And I want to talk about some nice stuff. Is that okay? I don't know if that's where you came, all of you, but that's what we're going to discuss. When I was about 21 years old, 22 years old, they opened up Jordan to Israelis. They didn't know what was coming, but they did it anyway. And you were allowed to bring groups of Israelis to Jordan, right? And it became very, very popular. There was always one or two people, but it became like an official thing. So there was an organization I saw that was asking people to raise funds. I can't even remember who it was. Russian Jewry, or someone. And we're going back many, many years, going back like 30 years or so. And it was a sponsored walk through Jordan, up the west coast. So I applied for this thing, and they said you have to raise this amount of money, and you have to be interviewed, because be very, very careful. And about 30 of us qualified for this, and we did a hike for a week and a half from the bottom of Jordan all the way up the west coast, so you could see Israel from the other side, and it was a big deal. It was such a big deal that we actually had Jordanian government ministers. I still have photos of them coming to meet us along the way. We slept at night in real Bedouin tents. Not the stuff you see in Israel, where some Israeli guy turns up in his Mercedes, right, and then puts on the garb, and then sits in the thing, and then starts to make cheese, and hands out figs. It was like real outdoors Bedouin tent, all of us together in sleeping bags. It was one of those extreme experiences, which I don't really do too often, but I did at that time. Actually, I'll never forget, one night, one of my friends, we discovered, has a very bad snoring problem. And in the middle of the night, he was snoring the entire tent. And the tent was like massive. Right? Just literally, it's this humongous open air kind of tent. When I say tent, it's got like goat hair on top. You know what I'm talking about? One of these ones, like a real Bedouin tent, flat. And so we didn't know what to do. We tried to wake him up. We wouldn't wake up. We woke up, back to sleep again. So we actually just dragged him out of the tent of the night and left him like 200 feet. You could still hear it. It was still echoing through the Jordanian desert. And then he just woke up in the morning, and we were watching him. He just got out of his sleeping bag, picked it up, and just walked back. Didn't say a blessed word. It was a real event and a lot of fun. Anyway, while we were traveling, we had obviously Jordanian tour guides and Jordanian kind of military presence. And then I was not a rabbi at this point, but walking along, and the Jordanian guy comes up to me and he points at a mountain and says, Jibal Harun, like this. I said, I don't speak Arabic. Sorry, I know I look like I do, but I don't speak Arabic. Persian, I can, get by a little bit, but not Arabic. So the other people who were there said, this is the mountain of Aaron, Aaron's mountain. And there in the distance is, and this is what I'm going to describe, but you can now see it online, obviously, is this large plateau, and there's this mountain, like just sitting in the middle of this empty area, mamash, empty area, and on top of the mountain is a little blob on top, and then there's a little white tip. And we were just to the south of Petra, which is fantastic and worth visiting. And we were making, I don't think we hadn't reached Petra yet. We were on our way, and I said, can we climb it? It's maybe like 4,500, 5,000 feet or something. So not insane, but a bit of a schlep, you know what I'm saying? I want to see it. What is this? It's Aaron's tomb. This is where Aaron is buried, according to Islamic tradition. I said, I got to climb it. You know what I'm saying? This is Aaron, like the Aaron of the Bible, like Moses' older brother is buried here. And he said, yeah. So we climbed the mountain. As we're walking up, we see, and I'm never going to forget this, and I don't remember if I took a photo. This is when you had to have cameras that you needed to take to a chemist to develop the film. This is before all your time, but that's where it used to be, you know. There was a Hasidic man riding up this mountain on a donkey. That was and I was like, what is going on? It was so surreal. And we're going up, 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 up. And we get to the top, and there's this little white dome, and there's a man inside. There's a dude who's there all day, every day, protecting Jibal Harun. Jibal means the mountain of Harun, of Aaron, the high priest. And he's there, that's what Jibal Harun means. And we went inside, and you had to take your shoes off, because it's an official Islamic holy site, because they see Aaron as a holy person, Aaron from our Torah, as a very holy person. And I took my shoes off, and I walked inside, and whatever. I went to yeshiva my whole life, but, you know, what am I going to say? You know, I had my siddur down the bottom, so I just kind of like said a few words, and this Hasidic man was there really like, you know, going at it. I was like shocked. He was putting candles out. He was making a big, big deal out of this experience. And then later on I found, many years later, this parasha that discusses this exact mountain. And it's exactly as I saw it. The Torah tells us that Aaron died after a life full of tremendous goodness that we're going to talk about tonight. And Moshe Rabbeinu went up onto this mountain with his older brother Aaron, because Aaron died first. And he took his son Elazar, who took over from Aaron. And they went up to this mountain, the same mountain, I think, that I climbed myself. And there is where Aaron, the high priest, died after a long life of tremendous goodness. And the Torah tells us that it's exactly as I saw it. It's a large plain, and it's called Hor Hahar, a mountain on a mountain, because there's one mountain, and there's a mountain on top, like an apple, say the rabbis. Rashi said like a tapuach on top. It's exactly as I saw it, with this little white dome, you know, atop that. Exactly as we saw it. And the Torah gives a description of Aaron and his final moments. But before we go on to that, I want to talk to you a little bit about how beloved Aaron was. You know, when he died, which is the description of the parasha, it says the Jewish people mourned him for 30 days. And it says the men did, and the women did, and the children, they all went into mourning for 30 days. Moses dies later. When Moses dies, it's going to sound weird, people weren't that upset. Isn't that crazy? You would have thought the great Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, took us out of Egypt, and the man, and the splitting of the sea, and all this amazing stuff. But they weren't that upset. They mourned for 7 days. They felt something. But when Aaron died, everyone was broken. It killed them. Why? Because Aaron spent his entire life being Ohev Shalom and Rodef Shalom. He loved peace, and he chased after it. And there's amazing stories, which are almost unbelievable. They're written in the Midrash and the Gemara, how Aaron went out of his way to do one thing. His mitzvah that he was obsessed with was making peace between people. He hated it when he saw machloket, arguments. Nothing irritated him more than seeing people fighting. And I'll tell you just a couple of stories, and maybe you'll appreciate why he got such a bigger deal in terms of his, the mourning over him, as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu. They felt bad, but Moshe Rabbeinu was tough, right? He was the judge, he was the jury, and sometimes he was part of the execution. So people felt, a little bit intimidated by him. He was the principal. Aaron, he was the friendly teacher who brought you in, who you loved, you hung out with. The principal is important. You need it. But Aaron was the one that everyone felt a connection to. And there's a story about a husband and wife who got into a massive fight. And the husband said to his wife, "Get out, go to your mother's tent, whatever it is. I don't want to see you." And it was a terrible fight between them, and everyone knew about it because they're Jews, and news travels fast, even before WhatsApp. And he says, "I don't want to see you again until you spit in Aaron's eye." For some reason, that was an insult they used to give at people, you know what I'm saying? So news got out about this fight, and the news got out about this particular curse that this man gave to his beloved wife. Aaron sees her, and he walks over, and he's like, oh, my eye. Oh, my goodness. I got some sand in my eye. And she was standing next to him. It was planned. He says, could you just spit in my eye? Because I have something here. Right? And she understood what was going on. And she understood that in order to reverse this statement by her husband, she needed to do this. And she spat in his eye, and he's like, oh, thank you so much. You can go back home now. It's over. That's like something he used to do. He would see two people fighting, and they would go their separate ways. By the way, if he did it, we're kind of meant to emulate him. That's what Pirkei Avot says. He would see two people fighting, they go their separate ways, and he'd go up to one of them, and he'd be like, you know what? That guy just spoke to me. He's really upset at what he said to you, and he really didn't mean it. He goes, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, I don't believe it. I'm telling you. The guy's really upset. The guy said no such thing. And he would go up to the other guy, and he'd be like, I just saw, Moshe, and Moshe says he's so upset what he said to Shlomo. He's like, I'm so sorry I said this to you, And he would tell them, which ostensibly is a lie, because we've already learned you're allowed to lie in order to bring peace into the world. And there's many instances of great people, even God himself, lying in order to bring shalom between people. And off he went, and the two saw each other, and they're like, you, and they saw each other, and they hugged each other, and they made complete and utter shalom between themselves. That's how Aaron operated. He understood that the secret to the redemption, the secret to Jewish success, is when we have shalom between each other. Even his death was different. He died in a very unusual way, and the wording that is used by the rabbis to describe it is mitat neshika, the kiss of death. Those are the words that are used to describe the death of Aaron and great people. It doesn't sound so nice, does it? The kiss of death. And I think of all the mafia movies I used to watch. You get the kiss of death, you're in big trouble. But in the Torah, it's a fantastic thing. It's how God removes the soul of a holy person. That's what he does. He gives them the kiss of death. And the Gemara in Brachot, every yeshiva boy learns this as a kid, says that when a person leaves this world and their soul leaves that body, a few things happen. We're going to talk about a couple of them because it is relevant to our discussion. And depending on how connected they were to their body, their physical, if all they were was about physicality and they never looked at anything else, they weren't involved in anything spiritual, it's a harder separation. That's what the Gemara says. It's uncomfortable to hear, but this is the truth. And for some people who, they knew that their life here was a temporary existence and they're going to have to live elsewhere in a spiritual realm one day, right? They knew they'd have to leave this world. And so they were never fully, completely connected to their body. Their body was, they realized, just a temporary housing, right? They've got to take care of it and look after it. But in the end, that's not who I am, right? As the famous expression is, you don't have a soul, you are a soul. You have a body. Right? You don't have a soul, you are a soul. People who have that kind of outlook, the death separation is much easier. And the analogy the Gemara uses, I've got to probably think of a more modern example, but I think you'll get it, is they say like taking a piece of hair out of milk. Right? Take hair out of milk, it slips right out. That's mitat neshika, kiss of death. It's a much easier separation, and there's no trauma that's felt at all, as opposed to people who aren't involved in the spiritual world and don't care about it, and they're just involved in physicality and themselves. It was all about me, me, me. They say that's like removing a wool from thorns. It's just a harder process of removing one from the other, whatever this means. That's how it's described. So Aaron was and by the way, it's going to sound weird, but Moshe Rabbeinu saw this. He's like, wow, I wish my ending was like this. This is like really nice. And Moshe Rabbeinu, by the way, had exactly the same death process when he went into Olam Haba as well. I also want to mention one other piece when it comes to this little description. It says that he died. I think I mentioned this before. And it says, V'yasaf el mav. He was gathered up to his people. And then he's buried. And then he's buried. And we see this expression a number of times. That people die, they're gathered to their people, and then they're buried. I hear the dying part, that's called mitah. I hear the buried part, that's called kavura. But what is this middle section that we see mentioned a number of times in the Torah? V'yasaf el emav, gathered to his amav, to his people. What is that? Anybody know? It's what? So I would have thought it's the eulogy, the hesped, right? Gathered to the people. But what a strange expression. And why wouldn't it just say, and they were eulogized? We know what a hesped is, eulogies. It would say in the Torah. People got together and they were masped. And by the way, we do know that. Avram gave a big hesped for his wife Sarah. So it does use that word. Anybody else? Anyone else? What it would be? Well, Kaddish only exists after Kavurah. So we have death, gathered to the people, buried, and then Kaddish. Chevra Kadisha? Okay, it could be, but that would be one person. Who's this gathering and who are these people that all these people in the Torah, even Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Yishmael and Aaron and Moshe, they're all being gathered, yeah? People that ask them for forgiveness. It's something the soul itself is experiencing. I'm surprised someone's got it, by the way. Yeah, not that I got it. We do bury the body quickly. This is happening before burial. This is happening before burial. Has anyone heard of an NDE? We're just talking about it. Near-death experiences. And if you just go online, you'll see thousands upon thousands of videos of people from all over the world who've been through some traumatic accident, died temporarily, and then they kind of like come back. And they're all really similar. I've watched a bunch of these. They're all eerily similar. Yeah, that's right. I don't have a social life. They're all very, very similar, the description they give. And they all say one thing. First of all, one thing we all know they say they see a white light. There's always a light that they see. They all say they feel the most indescribable love that they could never have experienced. Had never experienced. Just like the most loving experience they've ever felt ever. I mean, it's a very consoling, because, it's a scary thing. Think about it, but, we've got to be adults. And this is what it is. They see just the feeling of it. And I met someone who had an NDE, and this woman told me she was scared of dying. But after this experience, she got into a car accident, whatever it was, she just it's just the most amazing. And they always say they didn't want to come back. I come back here, dealing with politics and wars and, if you're single, dating, which is worse than all of those, right? It's terrible, You don't want to come back, right? But they also say that they see family. Many of them. They see family members from before who sometimes they have met, sometimes they hadn't met, And I always say, if they were close to their family, it's great news. And if they weren't close to their family, it's terrible news. No, I'm only kidding. It's the real you. Any differences that may have existed beforehand kind of disappear because you're in the olam ha'emet, the place of truth, the world of emet, of truth. And that's what it says. So Aaron got to see his father, right? What was Aaron's father's name? Anybody know? Amram. And he got to see his mother, whose name was? Which was? Yocheved, right? And he got to experience this amazing thing. Right? And Moshe Rabbeinu was like, that's nice, That's the consolation I wanted to hear. I wanted to know that I get to see my previous family that I love, when I leave this world and go to the next world, okay? So this is how the Torah describes death, not as a terrible thing, but something which is nice and something which we're able to, yeah.
So they die and then they meet their family?
Immediately they see family before they're buried. That's the order of events. That's what the rabbis tell. This is not my opinion. Yeah. What?
What if their family hadn't got passed?
What do you mean hadn't got passed?
Let's say, hadn't yet passed. Let's say their family's still alive.
Oh, they don't see them, obviously, yeah. They see their deceased family.
It's only reassuring if you're the last one.
I hear what you're saying, yeah. Yeah, that's just the way it is. God decides the order of how it comes. It's reassuring. In other words, when we mourn, just interesting, when we mourn, there's lots of laws of mourning that we have, right? Avelut, a lot written about it. So when I was a kid, I thought we're like crying for them. We're not crying for them. We're crying for us. We're crying. They're at peace. We're crying for ourselves. Okay, that we've now lost this. This has created a vacuum in this world. We're actually upset for ourselves that this great person, right, is no longer in this world in order to. So that's why there's actually a sin. One of the 630 mitzvot is you're not allowed to overmourn. Have you seen these like videos of other cultures where they go crazy mourning and they rip themselves and they cut themselves and they flagellate themselves? We don't do that. We wait till we're married. We get it. No. Right? We don't do that. Chas v'chalila. Right? You're not allowed to do a srita. You can't cut your face or remove your hair or do that completely asur. Because when you do that, say the rabbis, you're kind of saying there's no olam haba. You're saying this person is going to who knows where. So you're allowed to mourn, and you should mourn, but you shouldn't overdo it. You shouldn't overdo it. There's a limit to how much you should, because it's for you. Now, having said all that, when a person, Lord loses a loved one, you don't walk into the funeral home, right, or go to the Bet Avel, person's mourning, and be like, they're in a better place, right? You don't do that. You know what I'm saying? You have to be, actually, you don't say anything. You sit down and you keep your mouth shut. And if they want to engage in conversation, you do. But the halachot, or the minhagim, and the laws are not to say a word. You just sit and go, they're upset, right? For themselves, they've lost this loved one. But yes, you don't see the people who are alive, right? You're moving on over there. It's an interesting discussion, the Gemara. One second. I'm going to get you a question. I want to hear it, Doctor. But there's a discussion in the Gemara whether the dead are aware of what's happening in this world. A very famous Gemara in Berachot. Are the dead aware of what's happening in this world? You seem very sure about that. Why are you so sure? Who says the dead are aware of what's happening in this world?
Isn't it like a thing that once you pass, everything makes sense? To you. But are you now going to be aware of what's happening? You're going to go visit your grandkids or something, So interesting, like she's not watching, I can do whatever I want, kind of thing.
Well, God's watching. You can't do whatever you want. But yes, I'll take it easy with that, love. Right? You must be good to hang out with. Yeah.
I think they're aware, like when my grandfather passed away, my uncle was getting married, and he came to him because he felt like guilty.
Very, very good. Now, marriage is a little bit different. And here's an exception. Let me just go back one step. The Gemara goes backwards and forwards and brings proofs, very wild, interesting proofs about this idea, and does not come to a conclusion. It leaves it open. Every time it brings an argument to say they are aware, it says no, they're not aware, and it brings proof both ways, and it does not answer it. The other rabbis afterwards, like the Marashah, say some are, some aren't. There's a whole discussion, except when it comes to marriage and a wedding. At a wedding, and there's a custom to even do this, to go to the cemetery and invite family members to come to the wedding. The Khatam Sof and others say that these previous family members come down to the chuppah. And they will do that. So that actually is an exception. Then Shamot kind of prevail and come into this world at that time. But generally speaking, they don't. Well, why not? Are they not interested to know what happened to their great-grandchildren or something? And there are many stories of Avraham, Isaac, and Yaakov who are made aware of what's happening in this world and told to pray for us. Isn't that an exception? So the Gemara says they're the exception. They're the exception, but even they have to be pulled in. So the general rule is that, not they're not aware, they don't care. They're just not interested. They don't want to come back here. You know what I'm saying? It's like you went through, high school, you want to go back in, oh my goodness, I want to go back there again. Right? They're just not interested. All the troubles that we have in this world become completely insignificant when you go to Olam HaEmet, the world of truth, Gan Eden, Olam HaNeshamot. We call it Olam Haba, but that's not Olam Haba. Olam Haba is after Mashiach comes and resurrection of the dead. See, Cheryl? Mashiach got a shout out. Thank you. Right? She's playing a game. Every time I say Mashiach, she takes a shot. I'm not getting drunk tonight, Baruch Hashem. Okay? But they go to this next world, right? And they go and they move on, and that's the... but are they intent on coming back into this world from it? Why would you? Right? You know, this amazing world of love, and it's all fantastic and beautiful, and they're just not interested in coming back. Are there people who get stuck in between? I wasn't going to talk about this, but it's in my head, so I'm going to speak it. Maybe someone here needs to hear this. I don't know why. But some people do get stuck in between. There is an idea. There is an idea of this. We know there's a Gemara of Rabbi Akiva. If I'm scaring you, you can leave. I won't get insulted by this kind of stuff, right? But most of you are Sephardi, you can handle this. The Gemara says Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva, was walking along and he saw this being that was suffering very greatly, that had died. And he had a conversation with him. Rabbi Akiva could have this conversation with him. I guess you'd call it a ghost, but you know, he wasn't walking around with a white sheet on. I don't know how he knew, but he walked over and he had a conversation with him. And he said, so what's going on? He says, I'm stuck between worlds. I'm stuck between this world and the next world. And he says, well, what can I do for you? He says, nothing. I need my son to say Kaddish for me. That will help propel me, or, you know, to the next world. I had a son. I never taught him anything. I didn't give him any education. And now I'm paying the price for it. So Rabbi Akiva went, and he's the leader of his generation, found this kid, sat down with him, taught him Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, told him how to say Kaddish, made him say Kaddish, and then he saw the guy move on to the next world. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so that's something else. So that's a whole different thing called Kafa Kehela. That's really scary stuff that I don't want to talk about because it scares me even, because it makes me think of all this, you know, scary stuff. There is an idea that Rabbi Dessler speaks about it, but it's based upon Kabbalah. He was a great rabbi who lived before and after the Holocaust. There is a concept in the Kabbalah that sometimes a soul that's completely devoid of any spirituality, right, like anything at all, can't find any rest, and their soul, as it were, travels around the world, is not able to find rest, right? Nowadays, they say such situations don't exist anymore. Yeah? Yeah. It's definitely not a coffee table book, not at all, man. It's a really dark black coffee, yeah, it's really not, no, not at all, not at all. Okay, yeah.
The soul isn't like ready after the soul isn't ready for long, but isn't it in between for like 11 months?
Okay.
Isn't that what the 11 months is?
Okay, so we know that a person goes through a certain amount of judgment, and the Ramchal calls this a great chesed of Hashem. Okay, there's no idea of hell in Judaism. Just, you know, it doesn't exist. There is an idea of a cleansing period that goes on for 12 months, okay? And if the person's a righteous person, it's 11 months. So the minhag is say Kaddish for 11 months, wait a month and say Kaddish at the end. There is an idea of that. But that's just a cleansing period, and...
But that time they're not in between.
No, they're not in between. No, not between. They're just able to experience it better. That's how they describe it. And the Rosh Hashanah talks about it in a very, very positive way, and says that it's actually something the soul wants to go through. Gives it a chance to, like, you know, get rid of all the stuff it, you know, should have done, and could have done, and didn't do, and wanted to do, you know, in between worlds. But that's not this. That is not this. Yeah. I see this topic as real interest over here. I do. Yeah.
For argument's sake, if one subscribes to the idea of reincarnation of the soul, right?
Yeah.
I love that topic. That's why I'm asking.
Or Rosalita, reincarnation of the soul.
But wouldn't that soul that's in in-between period, can they just come back and fix or take care?
Okay, so the question is, could a soul that's moving on, first of all, you don't need to believe in reincarnation. It's an optional area of Judaism, very unusual, because most of it you've got to believe in. It's not a principle of our faith. The Rambam does not describe it. The Gemara does not. The Ramban speaks about it and helps us understand mitzvot of the Torah, like Yibum. Says you can only understand Yibum, right, that particular mitzvah of the Torah, right, and Chalitza, by understanding the idea of reincarnation. It's not the person's choice. I know I hear from other cultures that the person chooses their parents or chooses their children. I've never seen anything in Judaism like that. Hashem decides, makes a shidduch between which parents and which child. Okay? And Hashem, according to the ideas of reincarnation, he decides who comes back, when, where, exactly the precise point, in order to help them maximize what they need to fix. And all their abilities and everything about them, right? Your looks, the way you look, your ears, your eyes, your nose, your hair, or lack thereof, everything about you and your parents and everything else, all comes from Hashem, and He decides exactly which reincarnation you go into. That is not the person's choice. But reincarnation, so how do we justify that with this idea of Gehenna? Gehenna can get rid of averot, sins, but it can't give you mitzvot. Reincarnation can give you mitzvot. Right? Gehenna, the cleansing that a person goes through, right, that it can wipe that stuff away. But it doesn't give you positive, you just get rid of the negative. So the idea of reincarnation is there to help people understand it, which most rabbis do speak about, do believe in, and make a big deal out of. Gives a person a chance to achieve things that they couldn't achieve before. We spoke of this before, right? A bunch of times, I think. Yeah? I think we've spoken about that a lot. I will just say that most people today, the Lubavitch Rebbe, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, we just had his Yatsa yesterday, he says there's not much reincarnation left because people don't have enough time before Mashiach comes. So the amount of, because you need a certain amount of time for most people. So he said this is the last chance. The whole reincarnation thing is pretty much coming to an end. That's pretty much it. He was very famous for saying that. Although a person can come back for a short amount of time, a person can come back as a fetus, right? Chas v'chalila, a person can come back as a fetus, and then, even that's something, yeah. Again, we don't want to use this as a consolation to people, but my wife had a miscarriage between, I can't remember anymore, third or fourth, I don't know, somewhere along the line. I went to a great rabbi, and he said, it had a tikkun. It had a tikkun, just being a fetus, right? Which we found very consoling, actually. But it had a tikkun, just being in this world, even as a fetus for one moment, has a tremendous impact on the soul. It's one of the reasons we're not so into abortion. Although you're allowed to get an abortion under circumstances, that's for sure, but there's an element because there is even a tikkun as a fetus, that's for sure. That's written in many, many Sfarim. I've seen that written as well, for sure, yeah.
Is it the concept of you believe in reincarnation not a universally accepted concept in Judaism?
So I just mentioned it is not universally accepted. No, it's not a principle of our faith. The Rambam does not talk about it. The Gemara does not, but most other people do. But you don't need to believe in it. By the way, in other religions, it's frowned upon. Christianity, you're burnt at the stake if you believe in it. Islam, can't stand it. Can't stand the stuff. They don't talk about it. It's not part of their religions whatsoever. But a lot of Jewish thought and understandings, one of the friends of Job, of Eov, who came to console him, most of the friends who came to visit him kind of said, well, you obviously did sins, you did this is why you're suffering. One friend came to him, Eliphaz, and he hinted that this is basically a past life transgression you did that God is fixing in this life, and he didn't answer him. That's how the Ramban understands it, because he understands reincarnation in biblical stories. Ramban, not Rambam. Ramban. Rambam says just doesn't exist. Doesn't talk about it. He probably never had a copy of the Zohar. Anyway, he probably was not involved in Kabbalah learning whatsoever, which is hard to believe because he was definitely living in places like Spain and Egypt that were. But the Ramban talks about it extensively. That's one of his main treatises. Yeah? Are we good? Can we leave the soul now? That was good stuff. All right, fabulous. I see there was interest in that topic. We should have made it the main thing. Okay, so right after he dies, there's an idea in Torah, we'll finish with this, just 2 more minutes. There's an idea in Judaism that when two ideas appear, or two stories or events appear together, samuch in the Torah, even though they seem unrelated, if they're put next to each other, they are related. The analogy I always use in my head is like the blueprint of a house. Let's say you don't know how a house works and everything inside it, okay? And I see this bowl, right, in the in the kitchen, and I see a faucet on top. They're two completely different looking things, but we know they're related because the water has to come out of the faucet and goes into this bowl we call the sink. But if you just look at them without knowing, they are two completely, unrelated objects. The Torah is exactly the same. So we see two things put together, they're related. So Aaron dies, and right afterwards, this group of Amalekites come to attack the Jewish people, come to attack them. So Rashi says, it's obviously connected. Right? He dies, and suddenly they come to attack us. Whenever you see great enemies come to attack us, this is important for us today, it means we've left the door open somehow. They don't just come for no reason. Something's happened on our part to allow them to get in. That doesn't mean we're not excusing their behavior. They're bad people. But we have not been careful to close the door well enough. And maybe that door could be a physical door, right, in terms of putting fences, but also there's a spiritual pritza that we've kind of opened up that's allowed these people to come in and attack us. Certain spiritual things. We know, for example, that when there's a lack of Shabbat observance, it can open up the door for other people to come attack us. Right? Actually, one of the first times Amalek came to attack us, one of the Jewish people had broken Shabbat, and no one had done anything about it, and Amalek came to attack us. So the rabbis say those two are connected. But what over here? The Jewish people are an amazing place. Right? We're about to enter into Israel. Right? Aaron's died, and we know that when great people die, they cause a tremendous kapara for the nation. Right? When a person dies, you should know that one of the best teshuvah a person's soul goes through is just dying. Just leaving, when a soul leaves the body, it's cleansed by that experience. When righteous people die, that impact is like a ripple effect right through the nation. I know other religions have kind of hijacked this idea, and people die for your sins. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that when a righteous person dies, it kind of creates a certain cleansing of the people who are still in this world. Okay, they didn't die because of you, right? But there's a certain positive benefit that we feel from that person leaving this world. It's just because they were always more than them, so they always kind of give of themselves even when they're leaving this world. You understanding this concept? Good. So he dies, and then Amalek come. So what do we do wrong? We didn't do anything. Up to this point, we've been, pretty good, for the most part. So the reason they came to attack is because when Aaron died, something disappeared. What disappeared when Aaron died? The Anaya Kavod. There were clouds that protected the Jewish people the whole time we were in the desert, and the clouds were in the merit of Aaron HaKohen, Aaron the high priest. Miriam died, and what disappeared? The water, the Be'er Miriam, the water well that had been with them the entire time. The merit of water left because of her. And that's when they started complaining about the water, right? And that's when Moshe hit the rock. So it's all connected. So they saw these clouds had gone, and somehow these Amalekites, these Amalek nations, saw this, and they're like, let's go get the Jews. They're lacking defense. Okay? However, we've been behaving well. So they lost that war. They kidnapped one woman. It's not a new thing that Amalekites want to take and kidnap us. They took one woman. Right? So it wasn't a complete success. Okay, who this woman was is a big discussion, but okay. But it's interesting that they came at that precise moment. I mention this for a number of reasons, and you can think of your own answers to this connection. We know that one person is able to hold back an entire army of people who want to hurt us. Isn't that incredible? That means the whole time Amalek are like, let's go get him. We can't get him. Let's go get him. Aaron's still alive. Cloud's still there. He's gone. The door's open. Now we can protect ourselves spiritually and physically even at that point. But one person, one great person, and it's not just for Jews, this is for all nations of the world, have the ability to hold back an attack of an entire army. Did you know that Job, we just mentioned him before, did you know he was an extremely righteous Gentile? He was so righteous that the Jewish people were not able to enter into Israel with Moshe, Aaron, Miriam, the Torah, right, Zipporah, right, and everyone else, because he was still alive. So what did God do? He killed him. He had to let him go, because the Jewish people have to go in. But Eov was such a righteous person, but he was living among the Canaanites. They were the most depraved, terrible people in the entire world. One good person can hold back a lot. The power of one person's deeds. Aaron is that one person. His great righteousness protected us. Job was that one person. Right now, there could be one person alive. Maybe there's 50 people. I hope there is. Maybe 100. But for sure, there must be one person alive today, by definition, because if there wasn't such a righteous person alive today, we'd be gone. I don't mean completely gone, because the Jewish people can never completely disappear, because we have a promise to Avraham, Isaac, and Yaakov that God gave us, Sarah, Baruch, and Leah, we'd always be there, okay? But there could be a lot more damage. I mean, we're talking about October 7th being terrible. You know what? It could have been much worse. Who knows? Chas v'chalila. And you always hear stories about miracles that happen even among the tragedies. Those miracle stories should be spoken about because that came in someone's merit. It could be some, I don't know, Persian sufter somewhere reading Tehillim by the candles. Who knows? We have no idea who that person is. We just think it's a great tzaddik somewhere, but who knows? Right? Just to put things into perspective. At one moment, it could be you. It could be you doing the right thing at the right time, avoiding machloket, doing the right thing, and you're holding back an army of people who are there to hurt your community, chas v'chalila, hurt your family, lo aleinu. All these things are possible. It's the importance of one person who's just getting it right at that moment can have a tremendous impact. We learned that from Aaron, and we've done 40 minutes. Thank you all very, very much. Enjoy dinner. Thanks for being here. Yeah. If your intentions are not good,
your intentions are good. There's two people, your friends or whatever it is, you want to make peace.
yeah,
Intentions are good.
yeah,
Not bad. But based off your intentions, you go in there and instead of helping the situation, you drop a bomb. It makes it worse.
yeah,
Are you liable?
yeah. You're liable. If you go in there, intentions are good, and you make mistakes, you make mistakes. You didn't check into it, make mistakes. There's a certain liability that comes with that. Yeah, there's a certain liability that comes with that. Intentions are good, but as someone said, the road is paved with good intentions. So there's a responsibility that a person has to take. Yeah. You have something to say? No? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Great to see you all. Food at the back. And then I think Rabbi Ruvain is going to be giving his class tonight, I believe. Yeah.